Have you ever been in love with someone, genuinely, completely in love, and then found out that everything you believed about them was a lie you were never meant to discover? I want to tell you something I haven't said out loud in almost a year. For 2 years, I was in a relationship I believed was the most honest thing that had ever happened to me. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt since I was a child. He remembered the names of my co-workers. He remembered that I couldn't eat coriander. He remembered that my father's birthday was in March, and he'd ask about it every year. These are the things you notice. These are the things that make you think. This person is paying attention. This person cares. We met in a coffee shop. The kind of story you'd roll your eyes at if someone told it to you. He asked if the seat across from me was taken. I said no. He sat down, ordered the same thing I was drinking, and said, "Either you have good taste, or I do." I laughed. That was the beginning. His name was Marcus. He told me he worked in property development, that he traveled a lot for work, that he'd recently moved to the city. Everything he said felt considered. Not rehearsed, considered. There's a difference, I thought. I was wrong about that. 6 months in, I introduced him to my best friend. She liked him. 9 months in, he met my parents. My father shook his hand and said, "You seem like a serious person." I took that as the highest compliment my father could give. Marcus smiled and said, "I try to be." By month 14, I had started to imagine our future. Cautiously, quietly, the way you do when you've been hurt before and you don't want to say it too loud in case it disappears. I never once doubted him. Not once. I think about that a lot now. The first time I noticed something, I ignored it. His phone face down on the table at dinner. I noticed it, but told myself, some people just do that. Privacy is normal. The second time, he stepped outside to take a call and was gone for 18 minutes. He came back in and said it was work. A developer in Manchester, running late on a project. I believed him. Of course I believed him. Why wouldn't I believe him? But there was something underneath the explanation. A quality to how quickly it came. Like a door shutting. I told myself I was being paranoid. On our second anniversary, he gave me a card that said, and I remember this exactly, "You are the part of my life I didn't plan for." I'm grateful every day. I kept it. I read it probably 20 times. After everything that happened, I read it one more time. And I thought, he meant it. That's the part I've had to sit with. Not that he lied, but that he didn't. Not entirely. He had compartmentalized his life so completely that both things were real to him at the same time. 2 women, 2 versions of himself. Both true, neither complete. One Tuesday morning in September, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Marcus wasn't coming over that day. He was traveling, he'd said. Manchester again. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman I'd never seen before. She was standing very still, holding a bag. She looked, the only word I have for it is prepared. Like she'd practiced being there. Like she'd stood outside for a while before knocking. I opened the door. She said my name. Not a question, a statement. She already knew it. She said, "My name is Diane. I'm Marcus's wife. I think there are things you don't know, and I think you deserve to." And then she waited. I didn't say anything for what felt like a very long time. I noticed the cut of her coat, the fact that her hands were completely steady. I noticed that she was watching me the way someone watches a person they've been thinking about for a long time. I stepped back. She came inside. She'd found my address in his second phone, the one she'd found 8 months earlier. She told me she'd spent those 8 months deciding whether to come. She said she'd almost talked herself out of it a dozen times. "But I thought," she said, "if it was me, I'd want to know." She pulled out a folder. Not to be dramatic. She said she knew I'd need evidence. She felt the same way when she first found out. Phone records, hotel receipts, a photograph, him and me at a restaurant I recognized, taken from a distance. I don't know when she'd taken it. I didn't ask. I looked at the photograph for a long time. She'd been married to Marcus for 7 years. They had a daughter. She was 5 years old. I did not know he had a daughter. I did not know he had a wife. I had asked him early on about past relationships. He told me a long-term relationship had ended 3 years ago. She'd moved abroad. They'd grown apart. He made it sound like sadness, not deception. He was good at making things sound like sadness when they were something else entirely. After Diane left, I sat in my flat for 2 hours without moving. I thought about every trip he'd taken. Every time he'd said, "I'll call you when I land." Every night, I'd spent wondering why he wasn't more available on weekends. The answers had always been there. I just hadn't been given the question. I called him that evening. He answered on the second ring. His voice was the same as it always was, warm, unhurried. I said, "Diane came to see me today." There was a pause. Not long. 3 seconds, maybe 4. He said, "Claire." I hung up. He didn't call back that night. He didn't send a message. The next morning there was one line. "Can we please talk?" I can explain. I didn't respond. Not then. Not for a long time. What would explaining even do? There are things that, once you know them, cannot be unknown. There is no context that makes them fit. There is no version of the story where I end up somewhere other than here. I had loved a real person. I was certain of that. I just hadn't known the whole person. Only the version he'd created for me. Only the sliver of himself he could afford to show. I boxed his things the following week. I didn't leave them outside his door. I arranged for a courier. I wrote a note. 3 sentences. I won't repeat them here. I did not mention Diane. I did not mention his daughter. I did not need to. He knew what he'd done. He'd always known. That was never the question. I contacted Diane once, afterwards. A short message. I told her I was sorry. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because the word sorry was the only one I had for what had happened to both of us. She replied, "Thank you for believing me." That was all she said. I understood it completely. People ask me sometimes, now that enough time has passed to be asked, if I'm angry at him. The honest answer is, not anymore. I was for a while. It was a specific kind of anger, quiet and very thorough, like something being cleaned out. But anger at him was only ever the easy part. The harder thing was the grief. Not for him, for the version of us I'd believed in. For the 2 years of mornings and conversations and small, ordinary moments that had felt so real. Those were real, even if the foundation wasn't. I've thought about what I would have done differently. The answer, most days, is nothing I could have reasonably done. I wasn't naive. I wasn't careless. I was in a relationship with someone who was very, very good at managing information. You cannot protect yourself from a lie that is constructed with care. What I can do, what I did, is refuse to let it become the dominant story of who I am. To refuse to let his choices write my narrative. That took a while. I won't pretend it didn't. I repainted the flat in January. Lighter color. It made a difference. Small things. That's how it goes. A different mug. A different walking route. A different coffee shop. You rebuild the ordinary before you can think about rebuilding the larger things. I don't think about Marcus often now. When I do, it's not with the weight it used to carry. I think of Diane more. I hope she's all right. I hope her daughter is all right. I think there is something particular about the grief of being deceived cleanly. No red flags you missed. No warnings you dismissed. Just someone who is very good at a very specific kind of harm. Someone once told me that the purpose of writing things down is not to remember them. It's to put them somewhere outside yourself, so they stop living only in your body. I've written a lot this year. Not about him. About me. About what I know now, about what I'm capable of surviving. Because that's the part no one warns you about. Not the betrayal itself, but the discovery, which comes after, that you were sturdier than the betrayal. That the thing that was supposed to break you didn't. I'm not going to tell you it was fine. It wasn't fine. For a while, it was really quite bad. But I'm going to tell you that I'm here. That I got through the part that felt impossible. That the grief passed the way grief does when you stop fighting it and just let it move through. And that the capacity I had for love, for real, full, paying attention love, didn't go anywhere. It was never about him. It was always about me. She came to my door. She didn't have to. She could have stayed in her own grief and let me stay in mine. But she chose to believe that the truth, even when it hurt, was better than the lie I was living in. I've never forgotten that. I think it was the kindest thing anyone had ever done for me, even if it was the hardest thing I've ever had to receive.